Good morning, friends. I'm coming to you from my car after dropping off kids today, and I'm heading home through the neighborhoods of Grand Blanc, and I'm thinking a lot about a passage of scripture that comes from the book of Acts. And in Acts chapter 3, we find a story of a man who was brought by people every day, a crippled man, a paralyzed or somehow incapacitated physically man, to the temple gates where he would be able to ask for money and receive help from others. Well, anyway, the story goes that he's brought there every day and put at the temple gate so he can ask for money. And Peter and John are walking toward the temple on the time of prayer, going to the temple to pray. And they see him and they stop and they have this conversation with him, and they treat him as someone with dignity and with respect. And it's an amazing encounter, and it ends up that he is healed through the power of God. And he mistakes it as Peter having done something, John having done something, and they say, "No, listen, we're simply the vehicles through which God's actions are done. It wasn't our doing, it was God's doing that you are healed." And there's something beautiful about that. But what I wanted to focus on this morning is that idea that there were people who every day brought this man to the temple gates. Every day would bring him to the temple gates that he could sit there and ask for help. And we might at first think that maybe they're only doing half the job, right? That they're not really helping him. They're simply bringing him there so that he can beg. But how else would he get there? Sometimes we forget that there is really a role for people in ministry of simply bringing people to the space where God can begin that work, right? Bringing people to a space, and sometimes that is the physical church. Sometimes that's bringing them to worship, and that's such an important part of ministry, right? Invitation to worship, invitation to church programs. But sometimes it's also just bringing them emotionally and sometimes physically to a space where they can begin to trust what God has in store. And so don't forget to have that ministry of invitation, that ministry of bringing, that those who have brought this man every day to the temple gates have. And remember that is just as big a ministry as anything else. We have that obligation as people of God to help others discover what we have discovered, right? Instead of just assuming that it is self-evident, we have to also help people discover God's grace. So my hope for you is that as you drive through the neighborhoods today, whether it's Grand Blanc or wherever you are living, that you will take time to remember those who might not find themselves in the midst of God already. How can we, as God's people, bring them there? Amen.